Hello fellow web developers and programmers. Today we'll be discussing server-side back-end programming language dominance for web development in 2023, the years past, and the upcoming years. I'm also interested to see what viewers have to say after absorbing this information. Now, if there are any comments written under this video, I'll read them over the first week or so until I move along to producing other videos. Now, during this video, you might think to yourself, but the majority of developers can't be wrong since they are the majority. They must be right. And you are wrong, Adam, for being a minority outcast from the herd. You've been tossed out of the beehive for thinking differently from the hive mind. So you, Adam, must be the wrong one moving in the wrong directions. And don't worry, I'll give you a great example proving that the majority of humans can be wrong about things near the end of this video. And it's hard to debate that reality about humankind, that the majority of us can be wrong. But before we get sidetracked too much, let's dig into some things that have a more solid foundation in objective reality. The first thing we'll do is discuss a very brief history of both PHP and JavaScript. Then we'll look at market share data for server-side programming languages in 2023. Then we'll discuss whether or not PHP can be dethroned. And finally, I'll make a prediction about greed-based movements and various entities that desire the death of PHP. So let's first start with a brief history of PHP. PHP was first conceived between the years of 1993 and 1995 by Rasmus Lerdoff. He wrote several CGI programs in C, which he used to see who was looking at his online resume and to maintain his homepage. He then extended it to process forms and interact with his databases. It was created and conceived as a server-side back-end programming tool for the web. Its source code cannot be viewed like other technologies. It gained popularity over the years and has remained consistent as the top server-side development programming language for the web for around 15 years now. And it remains the clear favorite in 2023 according to the market share data that we will look at in just a moment. Now, a brief history of JavaScript. JavaScript was created by Brendan Eich in 1995 for the Netscape browser, which enjoyed dominance in the early internet before Microsoft's Internet Explorer dethroned it. JavaScript has essentially always had server-side capabilities from its earliest days. Even in the Netscape browser, it had server-side capabilities. But JavaScript server-side programming never gained popularity for various reasons that we can discuss more in depth in future videos. And you can let me know if you want to hear about stuff like that in depth. But JavaScript then gained popularity as a client-side front-end web development tool because that was its primary conceptual function. And its source code can be viewed by anyone. In order to hide or mask its source code, it would have to be obfuscated. It would have to pass information to something like PHP, which is not viewable source code, or you would have to obfuscate data in order to mask that data, or if you wanted to mask or hide your application's programming. So it can send viewable data to the server-side development languages such as PHP and other server-side programming languages whose source code is not viewable, which at that point, what PHP does with it cannot be viewed. So the way that JavaScript handles data can be viewed by everyone, and the way that PHP handles data cannot be viewed by everyone. Now, my personal relationship with both PHP and JavaScript is one of great respect and great admiration for both technologies. And if one looks at my video numbers, they will see that I have way more JavaScript tutorials than I do for PHP. And I want to see both technologies enjoy a very long life and see both of them to continue evolving. I also use Node, I use Python, Java, etc., where I believe they are best applied and most useful in my projects. So if my project has no need for Node or no need for Python, and PHP can handle it all very well, and quickly and efficiently, I'm going to use PHP over Node or Python. But there are certain instances where Node or Python might be a better choice than PHP for just one or two things. But for the thousands of other things that PHP can do, PHP is the better choice. And Node and Python cannot do all of those thousands of things that PHP can. Now they all have their place, and I refer to PHP as the Swiss Army knife of server-side development, much the way I view JavaScript as being the Swiss Army knife of client-side, front-end development. So server-side being the back-end, and client-side being the front-end of development. Now when you're researching the market share data for server-side, back-end programming languages that are dominating the web, your search queries and search engines have to be correct. You can't just look for what's the most popular programming language in 2023, because that's not specific enough. We're talking about back-end, server-side development in specific. And you can't just go to some blogger's site or one of the entities that might have some kind of favoritism for one framework or another. You have to try to find entities that are known for dealing with data and statistics, or somebody that might be a little bit more objective without anything to gain by promoting one or the other. So I found a few very reputable entities, and we can take a look at what they say. And I also chatted with the ChatGPT artificial intelligence that everybody's going so wild about lately, and I'm going to show you a clip from that, what it had to say about PHP versus things like Node and JavaScript back-end programming for the server side. So here at Kinsta, it says PHP market share in 2023. PHP is the most used server-side programming language on the web. In fact, 79.2% of all websites rely on PHP to some degree, making it one of the most popular languages among programmers and web developers due to its widespread use. So people who say that PHP is dead or dying are just wrong. Now let's take a look at w3text.com, which does a lot of data analysis and market share analysis. So it shows that PHP is used by 77.5%, where ASP.NET is 7.2%, Ruby is 5.2%, Java is 4.7%, Scala is 2.9%, JavaScript is 2%, and that includes Node and other libraries that are not Node that are used for back-end server-side development. As I said, JavaScript has had server-side back-end programming capabilities since its conception in the 1990s. So 2% here in this chart represents Node and every other JavaScript library or framework used for server-side back-end programming. Then we have static files at 1.9%, Python at 1.5%, Cold Fusion at 0.3%, which Cold Fusion used to be a lot more popular, and ASP.NET used to be a lot more popular. But PHP has been consistent throughout the years. And if you click history, you'll see a chart that shows from 2000, well, this is a quarterly chart, but let's go to yearly over here. And this is from 2012 to 2023. 2012, PHP was at 76.6% of the market share. And it's remained consistent pretty much all the way to March 16th, 2023 at 77.5%. Now look at ASP.NET. It's gone from 21.4% consistently downhill, which ASP.NET is Microsoft's technology for server-side programming. So it started in 2012 at 21.4%, and it's now at 2023 at 7.2%. So it's gone consistently downhill. Ruby has gone uphill. Java has gone uphill slightly. Java started at 3.9% in 2012 and is now at 4.7%. Scala has went uphill slightly. Now JavaScript was less than 0.1% in 2012 and now sits at 2%. And that includes Node and all the other libraries for server-side programming using JavaScript, or server-side communication using JavaScript. Now we're going to take a look at just one more entity. This is a very reputable entity, and honestly, they're more JavaScript focused. They have more to gain by promoting JavaScript at Mozilla Foundation than they do have promoting PHP and other things. They stand to gain more if JavaScript gets more popular. And let's see what they say in their introduction to the server side on their website. If you scroll down a little bit, we can read that server-side code can be written in any number of programming languages. Example of popular server-side web languages include PHP, Python, Ruby, C#, and JavaScript. So you can see even Mozilla puts PHP at the front of the list for a very specific reason. It's because PHP has the dominant share of the market. In 2023, in years past, and upcoming years, it will still enjoy that dominance in the market share. Now, something should be said about Node.js and Python server-side programming for the web. There's only a few things that can do better than PHP can. I've worked with all of these technologies, and there's only a couple of things that Node or Python can do better than PHP. But there's thousands of things that PHP can do that those other things can't do, or can't do as well as PHP can. Can't do it as efficiently, can't do it as easily either. And PHP is just a more trusted technology for doing all of these things. Like I mentioned, the Swiss Army knife of server-side development. PHP is just more trusted by more developers and more corporations and companies. And I don't care what any company says or any favoritism they want to show. Every large corporation, if they know what they're doing with web development, they're using PHP in their back end. And some might claim that, oh no, we only use Java, or we only use Python. Well, then you're not doing much back there. Even Java on the back end, it can't hang with PHP. Now let's visit WordPress.org. Now you have to be careful here because WordPress.org is the official site for the free open source WordPress software that people use for building their websites. Now WordPress.com is a for-profit paid service that is powered by WordPress software, but it is not the WordPress organization. It's not the WordPress software. So if you go to WordPress.com, you're not going to get accurate information about what WordPress the software is or what it's becoming and all of these things. So let's click on WordPress.org about WordPress. WordPress started in 2003 when Mike Little and Matt Mullenweg created a fork of the B2/Cafe log. The need for an elegant, well-architected, personal publishing system was clear even then. Today, WordPress is built on PHP and MySQL database and can also be used with MariaDB, and it's licensed under the GPL v2. It is also the platform of choice for over 43% of all sites across the web. So 43% of every website on earth is powered by WordPress, which itself is powered by PHP and MySQL database. Now you might think to yourself, well, wait a minute. PHP is probably only so popular because WordPress is using PHP. So that's why it has such good market share numbers. And I think that's wrong thinking because WordPress, I think it's the other way around. I think WordPress is so handy and useful and used by so many people because it's using PHP and not the other way around. PHP isn't king because of WordPress. WordPress has become king of CMS, content management systems, because it uses PHP and MySQL. That's what I believe the reality is, and we can debate that, but it's clear to see that even if you killed WordPress tomorrow, another tool would have to come up in its place, another content management system would have to come up in its place to become popular like WordPress is, And it would have to use something like PHP to be as useful, handy, and easy to use, and so have such a wide array of features and functionality because it's using PHP, not the other way around. And even if you remove the 43%, that still leaves PHP as the dominant server-side programming language. Even if you remove that 43% of all sites using WordPress, PHP still dominates all the other server-side technologies. But like I said, WordPress, I think, is only so popular because it uses PHP. And like I said, another tool that comes up to take its place is going to have to use something like PHP if it wants to compete with WordPress. I want to quickly mention that there are lots of entities that you can get good market share analysis data from that are not biased, that are not just fly-by-night bloggers, and that have no special interest in siding with either Node or Python or PHP and things like that. There's plenty of good sources to get the market share data from. And I even saw the market share data from Forbes, the business analysis entity. Even Forbes understands that PHP holds a large share of the market, the largest share of the market, consistently over many years and even today in 2023. Now I'm going to quickly play the clip of me chatting with ChatGPT and see what ChatGPT has to say on the matter. Okay, now let's get controversial here. Which is more widely used, PHP or node.js? And I'm asking it this because I hear a lot of people saying that PHP is dead and that Node.js is everybody's using it, nobody's using PHP anymore, and I just wanted to dispel that. A lot of people are not going to like this answer.
PHP is more widely used than Node.js. PHP, Hypertext Preprocessor, is a server-side programming language that has been widely used for web development since the early days of the web. It is particularly well-suited for building dynamic websites and is the language behind many popular content management systems like WordPress, Drupal, and Joomla. As of 2021, PHP is used by about 79% of all websites whose server-side programming language is known. Node.js is a relatively newer technology, which is a JavaScript runtime built on Chrome's V8 JavaScript engine. As of 2021, Node.js is used by about 2% of all websites whose server-side programming language is known.
Alright, now let's quickly discuss whether or not PHP can be dethroned, when it will be dethroned, and by what. Of course, PHP can be dethroned, but if it gets dethroned, I believe it's going to happen in the face of lies, misconceptions, and favoritism by big tech that has vested interests in making other technologies come to the surface and have a higher percentage of the market share. Because there are a lot of big tech entities such as Google, Facebook, and other entities like Apple and others that have a vested financial interest in making other tools and frameworks that they may have developed, or frameworks that run on top of engines they might have developed, which would give them a business interest in killing PHP. And that's how I think PHP will eventually be dethroned and its throat will be slit, even though it's not even warranted. And it will happen in the face of lies, misconceptions, and brainwashing. But even if that's not the case, and it's not evil greed agenda behind the death of PHP, all things change. Nothing stays the same forever. Something will eventually come along that has maybe better ease of use, better speed, better functionality than PHP. So you can't really say that PHP is just going to be around forever. And of course, things evolve and things change. But when that happens, nobody knows. But for sure, in 2023 and the next coming up few years, till 2027, I believe, PHP is going to enjoy a large, healthy share of the market the way it has for the past 10, 15 years. It's not going to be so quick. And there's a lot of people that will today say, actually for years, for the last 5 years, they've been saying, PHP's dead, PHP's dying, and these people are completely bonkers. They're living in some kind of fantasy land that is so detached from reality, it's hard to even explain how cuckoo bananas these people are. Now that leads us into the topic of me predicting evil movements. I'm going to predict that there are going to be a lot of evil movements coming against PHP. And you can already see that has happened over the last 5 or 10 years because PHP is king. And when you're the king, everybody is going to be trying to stab you in the back to take what you have or to take the power and control that you have. And it's not like PHP is even profiting much. The whole management team and the whole organization that is PHP, it's a free and open source programming technology. They're not making much money from that. What they are making money from is the popularity that it has garnered over the years. So they just by default are going to be making some money off of any residual anything or side things that have to do with PHP. But as an entity, PHP is one of the most benevolent and loved entities in the programming world. Just like JavaScript is one of the most benevolent and loved entities. And even as it changes hands, because JavaScript has changed hands of ownership over the years. I think it's Oracle now that owns JavaScript. I'm not exactly sure, but it changes hands so many times of who's managing it and has ownership over the brand of JavaScript. Now I'm going to add one more item to the topics on this video, which is where and why I get critical of other developers. When I get critical, maybe judgmental, and you remember I made the video of framework snafus and pitfalls where I prove all of the downsides of using frameworks and how they're not actually productive but counterproductive to a developer's long-term life or long-term career. And before I jump into that topic of why I get critical of others and their development practices, I wanted to discuss, remember in the beginning of the video I said that the majority of humans can be wrong, and the fact that the majority of humans believe or think a certain way doesn't mean they're right about that just because it's the majority. The best example of this is in the spiritual philosophies and religions arena. Now, first, before I get into this, you should know that I'm not an atheist, and I'm more of an agnostic that claims to know nothing in an absolute sense. I don't claim to know what is going on in the spiritual realm. I do have my own notions, kind of like my own spiritual philosophy, and I do believe, I have a weird belief or a unique belief, which I'm not alone in this, but it's kind of rare. I believe that existence and all of creation is sung or brought into being by sound and vibrations. I believe the Creator has sung the universe into existence, not by actual song that you can hear, but I'm talking about sound, frequency, and vibration. And you can see this if you study cymatics. I don't know if many of you know about cymatics. Some of you probably do, but you can see cymatics playing out at the macro level and the micro level. For instance, at the poles of the large gas giant planets like Saturn and Jupiter, you can see geometrical patterns being formed by the vibration, sound, and frequencies coming off the planet themselves. And they've put audio instruments recording these planets and the sounds they make, and you can hear definite cymatics. And that's how you get this hexagonal geometric pattern on the poles of especially Jupiter. It's really evident. So that's what I believe. I believe that sound and frequency is what creates the material universe and keeps everything with a structure at the atomic level, the micro level, and at the macro level. So I don't believe that everything is just chance. I think that something has sung all of this into existence. And there's a lot of ancient philosophies that believe that the Great Spirit or the Most High has spoken word from that being, that entity, has created all that we see and know. And even in the Abrahamic religions, God, spoken word, created the earth and the heavens. So that's what I believe. But I don't believe it absolutely. It's just some feeling that I have in my gut. So now let's get into how most humans can be wrong. So we have developed over 5,000 different religions and spiritual philosophies over recorded history, which are actually just frameworks that we use for morality and for attempting to describe what we all observe and feel. Whether you be a Hindu yogi or a Buddhist master, a Jewish rabbi, a Muslim imam, or even the Pope of Christianity, or some kind of cardinal. These are all just different spiritual frameworks that we use. Now, we can't all be right. All of these 5,000 different religions and all the thousands of gods that revolve around these religions, it can't all be right and true. So that means, by logic alone, most humans are wrong about their spiritual notions. And even my spiritual notion could be just dead wrong. And I'm not going to stand and die on that hill. But religion and spiritual philosophies prove that most humans are wrong. And it doesn't mean that just because the majority of people are religious means that that is true. Because it could be that God or the Creator is behind just one specific religion, which would be the only one true religion. And that would still make... So even if God is behind one true religion, which is probably not the case, but even if that is the case, that means most humans in the world are wrong and going down the wrong path. And only the people in that one true religion, which would be a minority and not the majority, those would be people on the right path. But I don't believe that's the case. I believe that we're all equally wrong at some degree in our attempts to explain creation and in all of our spiritual philosophies. I believe we're all more wrong than we are right. So that's one example of where the majority of humans could have notions that are not actually true, but just because the majority of people believe it to be true, it doesn't make it right, and it doesn't make it the truth. So I just wanted to compare that to the development world, where just because the majority of developers say or believe a certain thing, it doesn't make it true. They could all be misguided and wrong. Now finally, I want to quickly discuss where I get critical and disappointed in modern developers. And it happens when developers disregard the raw beauty and the ease of use of both PHP and JavaScript. And this is why we have an oversaturation of frameworks. And I think that these developers are types that are brainwashed, new green developers, and weak, lazy-minded developers that perpetuate a set of lies because these lies help them feel equal to seasoned and strong developers, which they are not. Not all humans are created equal, and that's why we have the mess that we have today. These simple free languages were never intended to be abstracted all to hell in a general sense by what is now thousands of frameworks that exist only to make their specific authors rich or popular. Because what happened is people saw things like jQuery or Cake PHP become really popular, and the developers of those frameworks got really popular, wealthy, and famous. So everybody's trying to go down that road and become the next whatever. For financial reasons and for greed, basically. They're muddying the waters of these beautiful languages like PHP and JavaScript. Now, weak, lazy-minded developers, they use a set of excuses for why they use these frameworks and why they develop heavily bloated, slower-loading Frankenstein projects. These excuses worked when only jQuery or Cake PHP had dominance, which was years ago. There was only jQuery, and there was only Cake PHP and a few other frameworks, and they had dominance over the whole arena. But not complete dominance, because more people were still core JavaScript focused and not jQuery focused. For instance, people like me, I knew that jQuery was not going to last forever, so I didn't invest much of my time in learning its code base. And I knew that its code base was simply an abstraction layer above the already easy to use JavaScript core language. So now what we have are many thousands of frameworks with low conformity among their code bases. So the excuses used by weak developers or ignorant business owners, they don't stand up well now. These excuses do not stand up well now. For instance, the main excuse used, which is it's easier to bring in new developers into the project. That excuse does not stand up well now because there are thousands of different frameworks, each with a different code base. So a modern developer knowing just one or two frameworks code base really well would only be useful to a very small handful of clients or businesses, not even close to being useful to all of them. Now, on the flip side of that, knowing just the core language really well, for instance, JavaScript or PHP, if you know the core language really well, would bring a higher level of production speed and a much higher level of code-based conformity to all projects worldwide. For instance, a Vue or React developer will not be any more useful to a jQuery or Node-driven company. They won't be any more useful than someone who knows the core language extremely well. And I believe it's the opposite. The person who knows the core language extremely well will be way more useful in this myriad of frameworks, to where they don't have to go learning all of these thousands of frameworks. If they just focus on the core language, they'll be a much faster, speedier developer in any company that requires JavaScript or PHP code on whatever abstraction layer that it may be written on. So the core language focused developer is now more useful to all companies in a broader sense due to having a higher level of knowledge about how things really work under the hood. People who get caught up in these frameworks, they don't even understand how things work under the hood, when the core focused developer does really well. They understand what's happening under the hood of these machines. Another excuse that people use is that the code is more secure. And this is also a lie. And I proved how this is untrue in my framework pitfalls and snafus video, which you can watch here later. And I'll put a link to that video right now on top of this video on the top right. So you can click on it if you want to watch it now. But you can also wait till the end, and I'll put a link to that video on the end screen on a card. That way, at the very end of this video, you can watch my framework pitfalls and snafus video, which exposes a whole lot of the mess. And in that video, I explain what kinds of frameworks and libraries are productive to a developer's career, because not all of these frameworks, most of these frameworks, are counterproductive to a developer's long-term career. But a few of these frameworks are really productive to a developer's short-term goals. And I explained which one those are. And I also explained in that video how a team, or a single developer even, can create in-house class files for ease of use for new team members that they bring in. Or if they have to be replaced themselves, the next guy can easily pick up. If he knows programming well, he can easily pick up where that guy left off if the class files are all in place. So JavaScript and PHP are not difficult enough to use to warrant the existence of what is now thousands of frameworks that have confused the languages and have muddied the waters of what is two beautiful, easy to use technologies that developers should be focusing on the core of those languages instead of these thousands of frameworks. So in the future, if we keep down this path of confusion and muddying the waters and greed dominating the market, there will be no code-based conformance or easy sharing of code between the global community of developers. If we keep down this nonsensical road of abstracting PHP and JavaScript all to hell and back. And the same logic applies to all core programming languages that frameworks are developed for. We have become like the confused language tribes after God punished man for attempting to build the rickety Tower of Babel. Now, I'm not religious, but that story reminds me of what we have done regarding frameworks in the programming world. We're confusing and oversaturating what is already an elegant and common sense way to be. We are self-destructing the programming world, basically. Now, I think that's basically all I have to say, and PHP is king of server-side programming for the web. JavaScript, in its unabstracted, raw core form, is king of client-side front-end development. And that's the reality. All of these frameworks are going to come and go. They only have a short life, usually. Just look at jQuery. jQuery used to be the dominant thing just a few years ago, and now it's falling out of grace. But JavaScript will last. JavaScript at its core will last, so I urge developers to concentrate and focus more on the core of JavaScript than you do all of these frameworks. And if you do that, you'll be more easily able to bounce between client 1 and client 2, or company 1 and company 2, no matter what frameworks those companies are using. Because if you understand the core of these languages, you'll be able to bounce around all of these thousands of frameworks more easily, and you won't have to learn all of these thousands of frameworks so in depth. For instance, I could jump right into Node, I could jump right into React, I could jump right into Vue, and use all of them relatively quickly and easily without having to invest my career in that framework. And I'll be way more useful and handy to companies that can't use those frameworks. What if you get hired by a company that wants to create a framework? You can't build a framework on top of a framework unless you want a big rickety system. If you want to create a new framework that's going to get popular and that you're going to get rich off of, it has to be built using JavaScript core. And then you try to get it popular and have thousands of people start using it, and then that's how you launch your entity. But it can't be built on the back of other frameworks that might not last another few years. You're going to have to build it with the core of JavaScript, or build it with the core of PHP. And for business owners that come along, they have no idea what they're doing. When these businesses, these startups come along, they're just grabbing everything and anything they can to make their project work without any foresight into how well it runs, how slow or how bloated it is. They don't care. As long as it does the job they want it to do, they don't care about efficiency. They don't care about clean code. They don't care about errors. Nothing. Just look at everybody's website. Have you guys validated everybody's website? I think I have the only website on the internet that is error-free, or it's relatively error-free on the front-end code. I'm going to make a video about that too. I'm going to be grading all of big techs and teachers who teach code. I'm going to be grading their websites' front-end code, the errors, and discussing how to fix it. And maybe in that video in the comments section, if you want me to grade your website and tell you how to fix your errors, we can do that. But that'll be coming up in a future video. Alright, so that's all I wanted to talk about in this one. PHP is king. It's undeniable. But yet people are going to argue that and get their feelings hurt. So I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.